enterprises should move from demographic data, specifically because demographic data does not accurately represent who people are. I mean, while they are easily obtainable and oftentimes visually observed, right? People's age, their race, their gender, which is, sometimes fluid, uh, or even things that aren't observable, like their household income, while those things may be somewhat factual in describing what people are, they don't describe who they are. Right. So for marketers to really understand people, we have to go beyond these labels that we affix to them and think more about how they self-identify. Right. And we do that by getting closer to consumers, which I know is it's an odd thing to say because we live in a world where there's more data about people than ever before. Right. We have reams and reams and reams of data. However, our ability to extract insights or meaning from that data has not grown as significantly, not that exponential rate. It's only been marginal at best. And that's because we mistake information for intimacy. So if we really want to understand people and how they self-identify, we have to get intimate, right? We have to be closer in proximity. And as we get closer in proximity, we realize that demographic data does not really represent who people are. And we start to see the folly. We start to see the superficial nature that is demographic data, and gets much closer to who people truly, truly are. So these generational cohorts, they are another form of demographics, right? You're in the middle of a certain age range, right? 20-year age gap. They'll say you're a boomer, Gen X, millennial, or Gen Z. I mean, these are the demographics that we put, the groups that we put people in, boxes that we put them in, and we ascribe all these characteristics to these people based on their age. But age is a demographic, it doesn't accurately describe who people are. So the idea then is to look at who people really are by the way they self-identify. And we self-identify based on the communities that we're a part of, right? I'm a Collins because I'm Marcus Collins. I'm a Christian because where my religion lives. I'm a Michigander because I live in Michigan, or I went to University of Michigan, therefore I'm a Michigan Wolverine. My identity is ascribed to or subscribed to these things, right? I, with my own volition, decide to say, I'm a part of this thing, right? I'm going to join this club, this organization, this institution, this entity, and I'm going to fix my identity to it. And because I fix my identity to it, there are a set of expectations, beliefs, artifacts, behaviors, and language that's normal for people like us. And we call that system of beliefs, artifacts, behaviors, and language, we call that culture. And therefore, these communities, these groups, these entities, these organizations, these institutions that I'm a part of, they act as cultural communities with expectations of what people like me do. So for brands to move beyond this demographic way of looking at people, beyond the generational cohorts that we put people in, to start thinking about the way they self-identify based on the communities that they're a part of, it requires us understanding the communities. It requires radical intimacy. So we think about decisions, they are made in the brain, correct? Right. The brain is responsible for the decisions that we make and the actions that we take. And what we know of the biology of the brain is that there are three major systems, right? There's the old brain, what they call the reptilian brain, which is responsible for fight or flight. And you got, this, if you're an evolutionary anthropologist, we refer to this as like the first brain, right? It's associated with fight or flight. It's associated with the cerebellum, the brainstem. All those things exist there. There's another part of the brain called the limbic system, and the limbic system is very much associated with like memories. So you got the hippocampus, the amygdalas there, where memories are stored and behaviors are associated with it. So you have this part of the brain that's associated with our feelings, emotions, trust, love, loyalty, all the gooey stuff that relationships are made of based on the memories that have been stored and tagged with metadata. And then we have behavior that's also associated with the limbic system. which makes sense that our emotions and our behavior are related, right? We know this as gut instinct or intuition. I felt a certain way, so I did a certain thing. And it's hard for us to put into words to articulate that those feelings that we have, because the part of the brain associated with articulation exists in the neocortex, another system in the brain. Not only is articulation associated with the neocortex, so is rationality. So you think about this as you have one system of the brain associated with feelings, emotions, and behavior. That's the limbic system. Another system of the brain associated with articulation, the words we use, and rationality, how we linearly, logically think. And I think about this as like having a Kirk brain and a Spock brain, right? The Kirk brain is like, let's just do this, Marcus. It's based on emotions, while the Spock brain is far more rational. And we like to think of ourselves as rational human beings. We make data-driven decisions, especially in an enterprise scenario, especially in business. However, we aren't as rational as we think, not even close. We are far more like Kirk than we are Spock's. That is, we are driven to make decisions in large part based on what we feel. One puts it this way, that we're not rational human beings, we're rationalizing human beings. We rationalize the decisions that we're going to make. So we think about the biology of decision making. This isn't like marketing gobbledygook. This is how we are wired. This is how we are designed to make decisions, in large part by our feelings, our emotions, which are associated with the behaviors that we take on. So the idea here is that, like, how can brands measure what the brand means in the minds of people? And this, by and large, is the foundation of brand. Like, what is a brand? A brand is an identifiable signifier that conjures up thoughts and feelings in the minds of people with regards to a company, product, person, institution, organization, or entity, right? A brand is a vessel of meaning. It means something, it signifies something. So when we ask ourselves, how do we measure the brand's meaning in the minds of people? What we're really asking is, how do we ascertain what the brand means to people? That is, what is the interpretation of the brand in the minds of people? And the only way that we can really extract that meaning is through discourse. It's through ethnographic means, observing them in their cultural contexts, realizing that culture informs meaning. Right? Raymond Williams, he's a cultural scholar, will often refer to culture as the realized signifying system. And since he's way smarter than me, I would say culture is the realized meaning making system. It's the means by which we make meaning, the system by which we decipher and decode the world around us. So what we're really asking is, how do we measure culture and its ability, or its impact on how we interpret and translate brands? And that's done through ethnographic and ethnographic means. We place ourselves in the cultural context of the people that we want to know about and observe them. We talk to them. We extract meaning as we observe them, right? And brands, as a marketer, our job is to signal the intended meaning of the brand in such a way that people translate it as such, so that there is congruence between what we intend to mean and what we actually mean in the minds of people. And the only way we do that is to understand how people translate the world, not just our brands, but how people see the world, the cultural frames by which people translate the world around them. And understanding this with great intimacy, we're able to communicate in such a ways, implicitly and explicitly, so that what we intend to say is what it actually means their minds. What we intend to say is what's translated through their cultural lenses. So this comes from a provocation from a gentleman by the name of Simon Sinek. And he says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, right? And this comes out of this idea of the biology of decision-making, that we behave or we take action based on what we feel. And when we think about value propositions, my razor sharper, my battery lasts longer, the things that companies create, those things aren't terribly evocative. What's far more emotionally charged is why they do it, how they see the world, their conviction, their driving belief. Because if the brand's conviction, its why, how it sees the world, its driving belief is aligned with my conviction, my why, the way I see the world, the brand is no longer an entity that sells things. It is now a receipt of my identity. Is that I buy from the brand not because of what it does, but because why it does it. Not because of what it is, but because of who I am. And we find congruence between why the brand exists and why I exist, how I see the world, my cultural subscription. When those things are aligned, the brand becomes a receipt of my identity. And that's far more powerful than the car going faster, the razor being sharper, the sandwich having more turkey, right? More meat on it, right? It moves beyond those value propositions, transcending what the company does and focuses on why it does it. This is how we leverage culture as a vehicle to connect with consumers in meaningful ways. How do we get closer? I mean, this is inclusivity is an invitation for people to be a part of it. Where how do you invite people to be a part of something? Well, you have to extend it. Well, how do we extend it in such a way that people feel welcome? We have to know them. We have to know how they see things, to know how they translate things, right? We move the needle by being much more intimate. And that intimacy comes from having great cultural proximity, great understanding of who these people are, and how they see the world. And we know who they are and how they see the world. And we find ways where their worldview is aligned with ours, or what they're trying to get accomplished is aligned with what we're trying to get accomplished. We find ways to facilitate them so that people feel seen and people feel invited into what the brand is trying to accomplish. I think the brands who do this well, they become, again, not just a company that sells things, they become an entity, an organization that gets me. And when someone feels like someone gets me, the bond is tighter than someone who helps me get a closer shave. So how do we use data to tell stories that generate social currency? Well, data is just information, right? And the idea is that if we are observing people in their cultural contexts and we're extracting rich data that's full of meaning, right? That is expressive of who people are and how they see the world, then we can tell back to them stories that aren't mirrors that we place in front of them saying, hey, we get you, but there are windows into the world that they choose to inhabit. They become windows that allow them to see the world that they live in, that they experience. And the data, that information only gets us intimacy, right? Again, it's not about data. We have tons of data. This is about closeness, proximity, intimacy. And we leverage that intimacy to tell the stories that people want to hear, to tell the stories that people tell themselves that it seems like no one else gets. But when we tell the story, they go, finally, someone said it. Finally, someone sees it like I see it. They feel seen. And because they feel seen, they now tell those stories to their friends, to their people, not because of who we are, but because of who they are. And the stories we tell no longer become stories about us. They become currency for these communities, currency for these networks. They exchange between each other as a way of saying, I know you and you know me. As a way of saying, you get me. Not you, the company, but the person that is doing the sharing. And the person that's doing the sharing gains tons of social currency from their proximity to the people and knowing how to curate the right things for the right people, the right stories for the right people, that ultimately forms the bonds that we call friendships, relationships, family, husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, our people. So For the Culture unpacks all the things that we just discussed. And it's based on a very clear premise that culture is the most influential force on human behavior, full stop. And while we may know this intuitively, if you ask people to define culture, you probably get a myriad of different answers. And why does that matter? Well, if we can't explain the thing concretely, then we'll hardly be able to operationalize it. So the idea of the book is to provide language, lexicon by which we can describe culture, talk about it concretely, removing all the abstractions and jargons and the buzzwords, but talk about it concretely, and then provide the mechanisms that a marketer, a leader, an entrepreneur, a politician, an activist, a teacher, a community leader, or even our day-to-day citizens can use to help influence people to take action, to influence people to move. So if you're in the business of getting people to move, whether you're a marketer, a leader, a manager, entrepreneur, activist, a politician, a teacher, a parent, a friend, anyone, we're constantly trying to get people to adopt behavior in one way or another. Culture is the most powerful way to do that. And this book is meant to provide not only the language, but the mechanisms by which we can operationalize the power of culture and get people to take action.